This is Janet Vertesi from Princeton University, and in this talk I'll be presenting our collaborative Alt-Chi 2022 intervention, Anti-Racist HCI. Houston, we have a problem. Study after study is revealing that our everyday technologies are racist. They either discriminate against people of color actively or passively, or they form part of the background infrastructure that produces race and racializing effects in the world. Thanks to our design processes, we now have soap dispensers, pulse oximeters, and interactive cameras that don't detect dark skin. We have facial recognition systems that fail to recognize Black faces, legal systems that rely on algorithmic offender databases, and policing databases that draw on biased data sets. We have search terms, technical terms, descriptive terms, and jail terms that all reproduce classic racial divides in our society. Faced with this onslaught of racializing and racist systems, what should an HCI practitioner do? Prior work has focused on correcting biased systems, assigning ethics owners in companies, or issuing public apologies, although pointing out the problem in advance can get you fired. Fortunately, HCI scholars have also turned their attention to the tools of HCI practice themselves, and they've sought correctives. They've also exhorted us to do better with respect to the makeup of our own community. These are valuable approaches, and we applaud this scholarship and these scholars. Still, Ruha Benjamin reminds us that these kinds of technical mistakes are not overlooked, quote, glitches that require a post hoc fix. They're baked in. Bonilla Silva also reminds us that race is not just socially constituted. That is, the meaningful markers of what we assume to be race, or other than, or lower than, are socially determined, and they're reinforced at every turn. Just exhorting each other to not be racist isn't going to fix the problem, any more than ignoring it and adopting a race-blind stance will. Inspired by this scholarship, in this paper we suggest a different tactic. What if we took a proactive stance and decided to be actively, fully anti-racist in HCI? What if we built purposefully anti-racist tools, systems that aim to take the whole edifice of race-based discrimination down? What if we saw racialized systems for what they are, social tools of oppression, and we use the power of our practice in HCI to confound, undo, and smash that oppression? We were inspired here by work in the sociology of race and critical race theory, which articulates how and why race comes to matter as a social category. How is it theorized? How is it applied? How is it naturalized and taken for granted? And how is it built into the infrastructures of our society, from the geospatial layouts of our cities to who gets a mortgage or a job, to how our digital systems work? And we were thoroughly indebted to anti-racist work, the inspiration to not only see the oppression, but also undo it, one system at a time. In our intervention, we turned to critical HCI methods developed at the turn of the 21st century, when people in our field sought the tools to push back and design differently. So our research explores this idea. Could we combine an anti-racist stance with critical HCI to produce critical technical systems that take a clear stance against oppression and fight back? We began by combing through the literature to compile a series of anti-racist design principles, which you can consult here. We coupled these principles with approaches from critical HCI to address issues of concern that discriminate disproportionately against people of color in the United States. Our interventions are US-centric, but racialization is a discriminatory project that occurs in societies around the globe. And we produced implications via 4 research through design projects. An augmented reality filter that blots out the names of buildings and places on campus named after committed slave owners and plantation owners, replacing them with the names of prominent alumni and affiliates of color. The system was inspired by work on belonging in white space and built on Brock's concept of Black joy in digitally mediated spaces. The AR experience brings our attention to the historical and spatial legacies of racism, to decentralize naming practices and hold leaders accountable for iconography, while providing students of color with a fresh sense of belonging on campus. A website dedicated to centralizing resources for people suffering from eviction outside well-serviced centers in cities like New York City. Inspired by the impact of eviction upon women of color, described by sociologist Matt Desmond, the team worked with local service providers in a city with high eviction rates that disproportionately affect people of color, Memphis. The site produced maps of resources and eviction rates during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it linked community members by providing opportunities for users to share information, experiences, and resources, counteracting racist policies associated with eviction and redistributing power into affected tenants' hands. An interactive online map that displayed the effects of gerrymandering educational districts. In the United States, funding for public schools is raised through local taxes, not redistributed or equalized through the state as it is elsewhere. Neighboring schools can have dramatically different resources despite being right next door, depending on property values and ratios of minority residents. New Jersey was considering changing those districts, so the mapping project projected racial composition and funding allocations for the new versus the old school districts in an effort to redistribute power and resources in the state and reduce inequity by bridging resource gaps across social classes. Finally, a browser plugin that intervenes in online preference-based advertising, which studies show reproduce inequalities of access online. This project holds companies accountable for their racial, gender, and colonial injustices by intervening in the very spaces they pay for in front of our eyes. The browser detects which company is serving or paid for the ad, replaces the ad with a black square, and inserts instead a report about injustices perpetuated by the company. In this way, the team hoped to counteract racism inherent to preference-based ads, compiling an alternative dataset about them instead of us, and turning the tables in online advertising. As research through design exercises, the 4 projects showed what needs to change if we are to institute a critical technical practice centered around anti-racism in HCI. Our current systems for development are driven by corporate goals that minimize temporal and fiscal outlay in search of greater return on investment. This leads us to take shortcuts that reproduce inequalities and contribute to what Tressie McMillan Cotton describes as digital racialized capitalism. In line with recent work by Lilia Rani, Cindy Lin, and Sylvia Lintner, anti-racist designers must take the time and cost to do it right. More recent premises of critical HCI, such as DeSalvo's agonism or Harrington and Dillahunt's interventions in participatory design, prove to be powerful tools in our projects. But while early work in reflective or ludic design pushed back against capitalist efficiencies, we exhort critical designers to go beyond reflection and playfulness to inspire action. The problem of racism demands our immediate attention, and we found that projects that relied too heavily on reflection and play reproduced the problem that Bell Hooks calls eating the other. And for those concerned about whether or not anti-racist tech can succeed in a racist society, let's note that there's no technological solution to racism. There is no killer app here. And when judged against our premises, almost all typical designs fail miserably. So we converted our worries about failure into an opportunity to confront our discomfort, a hallmark of anti-racist work, and to challenge technological solutionism. We conclude by emphasizing that anti-racist isn't an adjective, it's an adverb. It has to be an active quality of responsible or critical practices of design, implementation, iteration, and evaluation. It should inspire us to imagine differently, reflect continually, engage and return to our core assumptions, and invoke ourselves and others to action. If we're to develop an anti-racist HCI, this must be our goal.